All right, last example. I just wanted to go over one more, just to give you guys some extra practice here. So I would recommend you guys pausing the video right now and just trying to do it all on your own. Um, that way you can kind of check your work, see if you're understanding what's going on, and if you can do it by yourself. Okay, so let's start with our usual steps. Start with graphing the parent function. So my parent function for cosine, right, is gonna always start at 1 since it's cosine. So 1, 0, -1, 0, 1. It's gonna help you a lot if you can remember those points. So at 0 we've got 1. At pi over 2 we've got 0. At pi we've got -1. At 3 pi over 2 we've got 0. And then at 2 pi we've got 1. So look, here's the graph for cosine. Oh, let's do that one more time. See if we can make that a little cleaner. Oh no. Maybe if I go backwards. Alright, much better going backwards. Okay, good enough. Okay, so this is one period of my cosine graph. And let's see, we've got two transformations, right? I've got my amplitude here of -1, or my a value of -1, my amplitude is 1, and then I've got a value that's going to move my graph up 1.5. So if we follow the strategy I used in the last example, we're going to multiply by that a value, right? Because that's what that negative is doing. It's multiplying, right? The a value is always multiplying to all of our values. And then I'm going to be adding or subtracting whatever this, I'm going to be adding whatever that value is. So I'm going to add 1.5. So plus 1.5. Okay, so let's go ahead and evaluate this. So we get, let's see, 1 times -1 is -1, -1 plus 1.5 is just 0.5. This one's just going to be 1.5. This becomes 1. 1 plus 1.5 is 2.5. 0 plus 1.5 is 1.5. And then -1 plus 1.5 is 0.5. Okay. Looks good, right? We start at the same place that we end. Wherever it's 0, right, stays at 1.5, which is perfect. That's the midline. All right, so let's graph this out. Let's graph this out in blue. So we've got... Oh, actually, I like one of those other colors. Let's use green. So at 0, we go to 1/2, right? So at 0, I go up 1/2. Then at pi over 2, I go up 1.5. Then at pi, I go up 2.5. 1, 2.5. Then at 3 pi over 2, I go up 1.5. 1.5. And then at 2 pi, I'm at 1/2. So now I get the shape of my graph. Try to zoom in here a little bit. Alright, and there's the shape of my new graph. Let me draw the midline going through it. Let's do it in orange so it's nice and bright. So the midline through my new graph is going to be... Oops, we can barely see that. Let's try that. Alright, here's my midline. It's going through 1.5. Right, this is 1.5. Or it's my attempt at 1.5. It's probably not quite in the middle. So here's 1.5, here's the middle. Okay, there we go. Alright, much better. Okay, so we can see from the midline, a couple things happen, right? The negative makes your graph start below the midline, right? So notice, so it got reflected, right? The point usually starts above the midline, so my graph in the green got reflected. So everything's flipped, right? If we compare the graph in the green with the graph in the black, it all got flipped. So that's what that negative does. And then the 1.5 just moved everything up 1.5 units. So there we go. That should be our graph. Let's look at all of the features of this graph. All right, so there it is. Let's go ahead and find the domain. We know the domain is going to be all real numbers. All real numbers or from negative infinity to infinity. The range, let's see, the lowest number is 0.5 and the highest number is 2.5. So the lowest number is 0.5. Let me do it as an inequality first. And the highest number is 2.5. And if we do this in interval notation, it would be 0.5, comma, 2.5. Whoops, that should be bracket because it's equal to it. Amplitude is the absolute value of -1, which is just 1. Period stays as 2 pi. X-intercepts, there are no x-intercepts. The graph does not touch the x-axis. Y-intercepts, there should be 1 at 0.5, so 0 and then 0.5. Intervals of increase, let's do intervals of increase in blue. So my interval of increase, so it's increasing, it's increasing, it's increasing up until it hits this peak, and then we'll highlight the interval of decrease in red, so it decreases the rest of the way. Alright, so that first half is an increase, so from 0 all the way to pi, right? That's halfway, and then the decrease is from pi all the way to 2 pi.